An alien mother crashed into his barn, died giving birth. Now her child calls him father. The night the stars fell, Thomas Green had only just returned from town. His boots were muddy, his jacket smelled of hay, and the summer air clung heavy to his skin. Out on the rolling Kentucky fields, his farm lay quiet under a wash of moonlight. But even before he reached his porch, he noticed something strange, a burning streak tearing through the night sky. It was too low, too bright, and it was heading straight toward his land. His heart jumped. Without thinking, he grabbed the shotgun propped beside the door, tossed on his hat, and sprinted toward the barn. As he drew closer, the wind smelled of scorched metal. A loud, shuddering crash echoed across the fields, followed by the splintering of old wood. The crash came from inside his barn, where his grandfather's tools and half a season's hay were kept. Thomas hesitated at the doorway. Through the broken boards, pale smoke drifted out. He pushed the door open fully, and what he saw stole his breath. A small, silver craft, about the size of a pickup, sat tilted among scattered straw and splintered beams. Its skin shimmered like living mercury, though marred by burns and gashes. Steam hissed from open panels, and sparks leapt into the air. Then something moved. Thomas raised a shotgun, though his hands trembled. The metal creaked again, and from an opening in the side of the craft, a figure stumbled out. She was tall, thin, and covered in torn, charred robes that shimmered strangely under the barn's hanging light. Her skin, Thomas's heart nearly stopped, was a faint, iridescent blue. Not paint, not makeup. Real. Her face was narrow, beautiful in an otherworldly way, but twisted in pain. She gasped, doubling over, one hand clutching her belly. And that was when Thomas saw it. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. Please, she rasped, in accented but clear English. Help coming too soon? Thomas dropped the shotgun. Good Lord. Without pausing to think, he rushed to her side and caught her before she collapsed fully into the straw. Her body was fever-hot, and she shook with every breath. Easy, easy, he murmured, guiding her gently to the ground. Her eyes met his, large, black, glimmering with fear and pain. Child coming now. The next minutes blurred together in a chaos Thomas could hardly comprehend. He delivered calves and foals, but never a baby, and certainly not an alien baby. But instinct and desperation guided his hands. He fetched towels from the farmhouse, boiled water, and returned, finding her lying in the straw, breath ragged. She cried out, her voice echoing off the barn walls. Outside, the farm lay silent except for the hum of night insects and the distant bark of a dog. Thomas knelt by her head. I'm here. I'm not leaving. She grabbed his arm, her nails biting into his skin. Don't let them find him. Before Thomas could ask who they were, she gave a final, wrenching cry. In that raw moment, he saw more humanity in her than he'd seen in many men. And then, with trembling hands, he helped bring her child into the world. A small, squirming figure, slick and crying, with skin the same iridescent blue as hers. The child opened wide, dark eyes, and let out a thin, piercing wail. It's a boy, Thomas whispered, almost laughing from relief and disbelief. Tears streamed from her eyes. My son, thank you. Thomas wrapped the baby in a clean cloth. The mother's breathing slowed, grew shallow. Panic surged in his chest. Stay with me. You need rest. Don't close your eyes. But her gaze turned distant. They're coming, save him, please. Her head fell back. The rise and fall of her chest stilled. Thomas felt the cold sink into him as the truth settled. She was gone. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Then the baby's cry pulled him back. He clutched the child close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his chest. Thomas carried the baby back to his farmhouse. His hands still shook. Everything felt unreal, like a fever dream he couldn't wake from. In the kitchen, he cleared space beside the stove and gently set the newborn in an old wooden fruit crate lined with towels. Outside, the barn still smoldered around the crashed ship. Thomas's mind raced. Who was she running from? Would they come here? He couldn't let anyone find the boy. Morning came. Thomas buried the mother at the edge of his field, under an ancient oak. He didn't know her name, so he carved a simple wooden marker, etched only with the words, "A mother." All day he checked the sky, but the field stayed quiet. The boy, whom Thomas found himself calling Ben, after his own late father, slept soundly, except when hunger stirred him. Thomas fed him warm milk from a dropper, cleaned him, and whispered gentle words the way his mother had once whispered to him. Though the boy's skin was blue, his cries, his tiny hands, the way his fist curled around Thomas's thumb, these were all heartbreakingly familiar. Human and yet not. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. Memories of the mother's last words haunted him. "They're coming, save him." The next evening, the wind changed. Thomas stood on his porch, holding Ben wrapped in a blanket. Over the horizon, a second ship approached, not crashing this time, but descending slowly and silently onto the far end of his field. A ramp lowered. Figures emerged, tall, armored, with weapons slung at their sides. Their movements were precise, mechanical. Thomas's pulse thundered in his ears. He tightened his grip on Ben. Quietly, he backed inside and placed the baby in the pantry, behind sacks of grain. Then he stepped outside, shotgun across his arm. 4 figures approached. Up close, they looked almost human, but their eyes were too dark, their skin too perfect, and they moved without the smallest wasted motion. One stepped forward. "You have something that belongs to us," he said, his voice cold and even. Thomas forced his voice to stay steady. "I don't know what you mean." "A female fugitive landed here. She carried stolen property, her offspring. Return the child, and we will leave." Thomas swallowed. "What do you want with him?" "He's just a baby. He is ours by law." Thomas thought of the mother's desperate plea, of Ben's tiny hand curling around his thumb. "No," Thomas said quietly. "You're not taking him." For a heartbeat, silence hung thick. Then the leader raised his hand, signaling the others. Thomas lifted his shotgun, heart pounding, but before he could fire, a flash of light knocked him backward. The ground slammed into his back, knocking the breath from his lungs. When his vision cleared, the figure stood over him. "You cannot stop us," the leader said, voice colder than before. But then, a small cry rose from the pantry. The leader turned, striding toward the sound. Thomas's vision swam, pain radiating through his chest. He forced himself to move, crawling after them. One of the soldiers reached for Ben. "Don't," Thomas gasped. And then something strange happened. Ben began to glow. Faint at first, then brighter. The light seemed to burn into the soldiers' eyes. They recoiled, shouting words in a language Thomas didn't know. A wave of energy burst out from the boy, rippling the air. The soldiers staggered, weapons dropping from their hands. The leader turned, rage twisting his perfect features. "He cannot be allowed." But before he could finish, Ben's glow brightened, filling the pantry, and then everything went still. When Thomas opened his eyes, the soldiers were gone. Only Ben remained, lying quietly in the pantry, the glow fading from his tiny skin. Thomas crawled to him, gathering him into his arms. "It's all right," Thomas whispered hoarsely, though he wasn't sure if it was. Outside, the second ship was gone. The field lay quiet again. In the days that followed, Thomas stayed watchful, but no one else came. At night, he sat by the baby's makeshift cradle, thinking of the mother, how she'd crashed here, trusting a stranger to save her child, and of the boy himself, so small, yet already powerful in ways Thomas couldn't fully understand. Months passed. The seasons changed. Ben grew, his blue skin remaining, but his smile, his laughter, and the way he toddled after Thomas, those were familiar and warm, reminders that love could bridge even the widest gulf. One morning, Thomas stood by the grave under the oak tree, Ben on his hip. "I don't know your name," he said softly, voice breaking. "But I promise you, he'll grow up safe. He'll grow up loved." Ben babbled at the carved marker, unaware of what it meant. Thomas pressed a gentle kiss to the child's brow. Looking out across the fields, Thomas realized that sometimes family wasn't about blood, or even about species. Sometimes it was simply about a promise. And Thomas Green, the quiet farmer who once lived alone, kept that promise until his last breath.